keep my signal functioning, even though it says it's 5G plus. So thank you, AT&T, for screwing me over and providing amazing service. Anyway, I was saying that, when you have this cochlear implant surgery, what, what they try to explain to you, they have you come out and you'll see like the implant, and in the implant, you have the coil for the implant, and then you have the magnetic piece, and it's all in silicone, right? And the coil, they have to drill a small little hole, right, in your cochlea, in your head, to get to the cochlea, and then they kind of like thread through the coil into the cochlea and have it, kind of like wind around. And on the coil, spaced out, throughout the whole coil, there's, probably like 20 something, 22, 24 little diodes or whatever they call them. But those are the pieces that send the electronic sound or stimulus to the brain for it to begin to interpret or attempt to interpret the sound that we hear from the sound processor, right? So you're not hearing with your ear anymore. You're hearing with the sound processor sending an electronic impulse or signal to the cochlear implant through to your brain, and then your brain tries to make out what that electronic impulse is, hence the beeps and chirps, right? And so, when you start thinking about that, oh God, they got to drill a hole in there, they got to run this in there, the chances of all this stuff not working, and then you get to activation day and they turn it all on, and now all you hear are beeps and chirps. It's a lot. It's a lot. You're going from surgery to activation. It's about 3 to 4 weeks. For me, it was about 3.5 weeks, and then then it's rehab. And after they turned it on and I was getting the beeps and the chirps, in my mind I was just like, what am I gonna do? I need to work. How am I gonna work hearing beeps and chirps while I'm trying to hear a customer in front of me? Working at Apple at the Genius Bar, and I'm seeing, a customer every 15-20 minutes. And they're trying to get help from me, right? They're describing their issue, what's going on with their device, and I need to be able to hear this. And I'm hearing beep, 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 shh, beep, 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 beep. It's just, and trying to, read their lips, look at their body language, decipher all of this, plus the little bit that I could hear from the hearing aid that I have in my left ear. And it was just a lot. So I was out of work before going back after surgery. I was out of work for about 2 months. And then when I got back to work, it's, everybody's like excited to see me, and they're like, hey, Mikey, what's going on? How was surgery? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? And it's like, no, I can't. All I hear are beeps and chirps. And they were just, everybody was bummed, and they were all, really rooting for me and cheering me on. They thought that this was going to be, just like the YouTube videos, a miracle. And we were all bummed. They were bummed for me. And, it was like, hey, I'm just going to keep putting the work in, and we're going to make this work. And, every time I would do a follow-up with my audiologist, she'd run through the system. I would have to see her every month for like the first 6 months. I was seeing her like every month, just to make adjustments and tweaks to the system, just to make sure everything was programmed correctly, and so that she can gauge my progress. And she would see how disappointed I was, and she just kept telling me, she's like, just wear it, just put it on. She's like, I know this is difficult. I know this is not what you want to hear. She was like, just wear it. Don't stop wearing it. Your brain will figure this out. She was like, get yourself some read-along books. She said, play your favorite songs, your favorite music, watch your favorite movies with the captions on. I always use the captions anyway. She was like, what you need to do is get your brain to associate the sounds you're familiar with the words. So read along as you're reading the words, and the sound, your brain is matching the sound because you're listening to the spoken word, you're looking at it, right? You're reading the spoken word. And with music, you're listening to songs that are familiar. So even though you can't really hear it, in your brain, you know the song, you know the lyrics, right? And so as you're listening to those songs, your brain is putting two and two together and saying, oh yeah, we know this song, we know these lyrics. This is what that beep, that chirp, that hiss, that static means. And we just did that all the time. And eventually we went from beeps and chirps, and this is, probably over the course of a year, we went from beeps and chirps to minions speaking. No. We went to chipmunks speaking minionese. So they're speaking minion over an AM radio. And so it went from beep, 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 beep to me, 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 right? So like chipmunks, just really high pitched minionese on an AM radio because it still had a lot of static and feedback, and it was just really, really, still couldn't make out sounds and words and stuff like that. It was just as someone was standing in front of me talking, I'd hear what they're saying, for the most part in my left ear with my hearing aid, but coming from the right side, it was just, and when I would describe it to people, they're just like, huh? How could you do that? How can you live like that? How can you manage with that? That's got to be super annoying. It was annoying. But you learn to tune it out. And so I only heard it when I focused on it. Otherwise, I just didn't hear anything because I would just tune it out. I would hear more, right? Because now at this point, with my left ear and my hearing aid, I've got the volume cranked on this ear because I need to bring in as much volume. I at the time, I would say I'm trying to bring in more sound, right? But making something louder doesn't mean that it's better. But at the time, that's what I needed to do because I needed to be able to hear. And so I would keep the volume all the way up. And, potentially, I even spoke to my doctor about this. I'm like, aren't I ruining my hearing more by using these hearing aids on max volume? Like, isn't that the same as wearing, headphones and blasting music in my ears all day? And they're like, yeah, kind of, but, not really. Like, for me, the damage is done, right? And that's what I needed to do to get by, because the devices, I just, there was no more power for me in the device. And so, now I had this sound processor, by the way, which is like, the hearing aids I had mentioned were, probably about $4,000 for the pair. When I got the Cochlear Implant, thankfully I had, good insurance at the time through Apple. When you get implanted, they give you two devices, one as a backup the very first time. And, each of those devices is like 10, 15 grand. And I had to get a new hearing aid. That new hearing aid was almost $5,000 by itself. And again, thankfully, I had really good insurance at the time, so my out of pocket was not a deal breaker for me at the time. And so, you know, after surgery, because they had to run the implant, you know, through my cochlea, what the doctor had said was you could lose the rest of your hearing in that ear, you know, after being implanted. And I was like, well, I can't hear now anyway, right? I had like 10-20% hearing left in the ear. And so I was like, you know, it's a risk I have to take, I guess, you know. And after surgery, they did some testing. After, you know, everything recovered and healed well, we did a hearing test, and I have about 1 to 2% hearing in my right ear. But that 1 to 2% is like zero. It's like nothing. If I take off this cochlear implant, I cannot hear. You'd have to like speak directly into my ear, and even then, I still can't really make out what you're saying. So, you know, for me, it's negligible at this point. So getting back to the rehab part, right? So I'm listening to music, I'm doing the read-alongs. It's a year later. I'm getting the Chipmunks now, speaking Mignonese on the AM radio, trying to get, you know, through work and stuff like that. We move on to year 2, second year after activation and surgery. And, you know, at this point, I'm wearing my device every day, all day, whether I can hear or not, right? Because my brain has to figure this out. My brain has to figure it out. It's gonna figure it out. And now we're in year 2, and somehow I notice something changes. I can start differentiating the voice of people I'm speaking to. So the thing to remember is that the implants and even the hearing aids, they're not restoring normal hearing. I don't have normal hearing. Someone wearing a hearing aid does not have normal hearing. The hearing aid is filling in frequencies that the individual, like myself, may not be able to hear, but it's an amplification device. It's amplifying the sound that is being picked up, right, from the microphones. So it's more like listening to a speakerphone, right? Like speaking to somebody on a telephone with the speaker on. It's more like that, where it still doesn't, it's not normal hearing, right? You can tell when you listen to someone on a speakerphone that it's mechanical, right? It doesn't sound natural, but you can make out people's voices, right? You can tell the difference between the people you're talking to. And so I got to that point with the cochlear. However, I needed the hearing aid and the cochlear together to be able to fill in the gaps and the sound, to make the sound more fuller and richer, if that makes sense. With just one device or the other, it would all fall apart. So if I tried to just use the implant at the time, it was very robotic. So we went from the beeps and chirps to the chipmunks speaking minion to a very robotic kind of sound. So I could hear voices, I could hear words, but it was very robotic. Music I was still struggling with. I could hear the lyrics, and I could hear some of the musical instruments, the musical sounds, tones, but I still struggled with them. My brain couldn't make out certain tones or certain instruments. But because I was listening to music that I was familiar with, I knew what I was listening to. If I was listening to a new release song, I struggled. I struggled with the lyrics. I struggled with, you know, keeping up with the beat or the instruments. And so with both devices, the hearing aid and the cochlear together, I was able to fill in the gaps and things felt a little more whole and complete. But by itself, no. And same with the hearing aid. If I had just the hearing aid by itself, it wasn't as clear. Almost because of the hearing loss, almost with the cochlear on, it was very robotic, very mechanical, and also very muffled because I lost the clarity of having stereo, right? Left and right together. And so that continued for year 2. Finally, towards year 3, things started filling in. I could differentiate voices. I could differentiate sounds. I can pinpoint where sounds were coming from. Things started getting better. Again, even now today, 10 years later, I do not have normal hearing. I will never have normal hearing. I hear amplified sound, digitized sound on the side of the cochlear implant, and amplified sound on the side of the hearing aid. Now let's just hop, skip, jump to the last maybe 2 years. I am now in the situation where I was 10 years ago, where I'm now losing more of the hearing in my left ear. And my hearing aid is not providing enough power and enough sound to get me through the day. I'm struggling a lot with the hearing aid side. And it's a struggle because I rely on the stereo sound aspect. I rely on both ears working, or both sides of the technology working. I rely on the cochlear implant. I can manage with just the cochlear implant, but the sound is not as full and complete as when I have both devices on. And so at my last audiogram, my last exam with the audiologist, this was probably 6 months ago, so earlier this year, they are basically recommending that I start considering getting implanted in my left ear, because they believe that it's only a matter of time before I lose the remaining hearing in my left ear. And so it's brought me back to that place I was in 10 years ago, you know, having dealt with making a decision of what I need to do, what I want to do with, you know, getting implanted. And so it's brought up some feelings and emotions. I think now, 10 years later, I'm at a better place with my cochlear. I could manage with just the one ear. It would still be a challenge, right? Because I don't have the stereo, I don't have the fuller sound. You know, I can hear, but can still struggle in certain environments and certain situations. And so, you know, right now, I am not thinking about surgery and an implant again. I know it's something I will have to decide on soon. I'm going to be 50 in a few months. I'm not getting any younger, and surgeries are not easier as you are get older. Your body doesn't heal the same way, and I, you know, want to minimize any risks with surgery if I can. While I do feel like I could function and be completely okay with just the one ear, if it came to it, you know, I know a few people through my journey who have gotten both sides implanted, and the feedback has always been great. The support that many of these individuals have provided have always been phenomenal. Those of us in the deaf, hard of hearing or hearing loss community are very supportive of one another. And, they all say the same thing. Just do it. It's going to be so much better. And it probably will. It probably will. Will my brain automatically pick up the sounds? I don't know. That part I don't know. I worry that I'm going to have to spend another 2 or 3 years learning again, right? Because I think about the brain and what I know about the brain and the left and the right hemispheres, and how one side controls this and another side controls that. They don't always work together. They're doing their own thing. And so I would hope that when it comes to sound and auditory type stuff, that they work together and my brain just says, yeah, we got this. But I have to set realistic expectations, and the expectation that I have to prepare myself for is that that's probably not going to be the case, and I'm probably going to have a lot of work. And also I have to prepare myself for the fact that it might not work, right? It could work and be amazing and great on activation day. It might take me back to where I was 10 years ago and I have to do a couple of years of work, or it doesn't work, right? So there's always that risk. There's always that. And so that weighs on my mind when I think about whether I want to do this again, and whether I want to experience surgery again and recovery. Having my head cut open, and all that's involved with that. If you're curious of what the surgery entails, go watch some YouTube videos. It's not for the faint of heart. Thankfully, again, I had an amazing surgeon, and if I ever had this surgery again, I will seek him out, and I hope he's alive and well and able to perform surgeries, because he did a phenomenal job. But it's not for the faint of heart. So yeah, I don't do well with blood. My friends and family know that I don't do well with blood. I just don't. And I don't do well with surgeries and hospitals and doctors, and like even preparing for the surgery, my blood pressure was through the roof. In prep, my doctor was just like, you need to relax and calm down. You're going to have a heart attack, and we haven't even gotten into the operating room yet. I was like, doctor, I can't help it. I'm anxious. I'm nervous. And he was like, it's okay. Just relax. I couldn't relax up until they wheeled me into the operating room and gave me the mask to knock me out. My heart rate was through the roof. I can't relax. I just get so anxious and yeah. So that's where we are today. 10 years later, I am doing better. Like I said, with my implant that I have, things are working well. I have maybe another 15 years, hopefully more. But these implants internally, the internal parts tend to last about 25 years. So I'm 10 years in. So hopefully I get, 15 plus years of use from my implant, longer, hopefully. The devices, I'm on my second device since I got the first one. So I get a new device an upgrade every 5 years on the external device, because the technology changes all the time. It gets better, and smaller, right? With everything today, technology gets smaller and better. On the hearing aid side, I'm where I was 10 years ago, and likely, if I wait another 10 years, I likely lose the hearing in my left ear. So it's something that I'm thinking about and trying to figure out what I want to do. I will probably start thinking about that some more, maybe next year, or the year after. But yeah, this is where we are. This is the journey. It's been a roller coaster of a ride. But I wouldn't have it any other way. Um, I wouldn't have it any other way because it's basically this adventure, this journey has helped me be a better advocate for myself. It's helped me build the life I have from the experiences that I've lived. And we'll see where it goes from here. As long as nothing changes significantly over the next 12 to 24 months, I should be okay. But yeah, it's hard to tell what's going to happen because these types of things change all the time and they change so quickly. But I pray that it continues the way it is for now, to give me some more time to figure out what I want to do and go from there. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody may have about cochlear implants, cochlear implant surgery, hearing loss, my type of hearing loss, Meniere's disease and stuff like that, vestibular disorders. Please leave me a comment. Let me know if anything I've shared resonates with you. Like and subscribe if you want to see more of this type of content, keeping it real, keeping it raw, keeping it about life. I really appreciate all of you, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks, guys. Take care.